This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, and my normal partner in crime, Aaron. It's the end of February. It's cold. There hasn't been football in a couple weeks. How does it feel?
Fine. Actually, today, this is going to sound weird, but it was like mid-20s, maybe getting towards the 30s today, but the sun was shining. It was a beautiful,
pretty out
sunny day, and got to get out there with the kids and get some sunshine. And then the sun was still like out until about 6:30 here.
Yeah.
And so that feels good. Like we're making that change from it being pitch black by 4:30 to there's good weather on the horizon. That means drafts coming up. Football season's going to start opening up. So things are coming to life. We're almost through the worst of it.
Yeah, I have stretches where like sometimes I'm literally in my office for like 8 straight hours and it's terrible. And I walk down the stairs at like 5:15, 5:30 and it's dark. And I noticed that today, like I walked down the stairs, I was like, wait, it's like 5:20. Like it's still really bright out. This is nice. It was like the first time I noticed it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to go through several different things, talk about the season in defense. We're going to go through some of the different pieces of special teams, coaching, give out some awards. Just if you're around the Twitter sphere and we're talking about defense, I think we have an obligation to say the name J.J. Watt just for search engine optimization purposes. What are your thoughts? It's going crazy all over Twitter. There was a legitimate report by Kimberly Martin this afternoon, who is not a Bills-centric reporter, and honestly might have been the first time I've seen her tweet about the Bills, that she reported that one of the teams in serious contention for J.J. Watt is the Buffalo Bills, and her phrasing was, and the interest is definitely mutual. Between the Bills and J.J. Watt. So I think that stirred up a little bit more of what was already fan hope into, oh, maybe this is possible.
For sure. I stand on it. I also have mutual interest in the Bills and J.J. Watt forming a relationship. I think it's cool. I'm not crazy pounding the table for it. I'd like it to happen. I think it would fill a need. We were talking a little bit off air, fill a need, but still allow them to address that in the draft and him to kind of tutor some of the younger guys on this roster. But all for it. Kim Martin, though, was she with the Buffalo News during the Tyrod years?
Maybe has. That sounds right. Maybe she was one of the ones that moved on. Maybe has some. So I don't know if that's actually. Maybe she has some. I don't know if like connections or sources still exist. Although I don't know. Maybe with the agent. Obviously, anything you hear from Buffalo that gets out there is never from One Bills Drive. It's always from the agent. So maybe she's hearing something there. And
I would guess.
I'd also say there's no reason not to see the Bills are a finalist for this. They are one of the top 5 teams that, Green Bay makes sense. Tampa makes sense. Cleveland, a lot of Bills fans are crapping on Cleveland. Like they're a good team, and playing opposite Myles Garrett isn't a bad thing, and they have a bunch of money and they won a playoff game. Like no, do I think they're quite as good as Buffalo? No, but you
get to play against your brothers.
Yeah, it makes sense for him to go play there. Pittsburgh makes sense. So the Bills are one of those teams. I honestly think it's kind of between Green Bay and Buffalo. I think are the most logical. There was another report by Ed Werder that his top 3 criteria: number 1 was quarterback, number 2 was supporting cast, number 3 was money. And I think there's a threshold. I think you have to be able to have the space to give him $10 million plus per year, but I don't think he's going to pick one team because it's $15 million and another team because it's $12 million. He's not going to take the bigger money. I think he's going to pick the right spot. If you can get to the contract level where it makes sense, he will take a little bit less to go with another team. He's not going to go play for somebody for $2 million because he likes the situation. But if you have enough money to get into the VIP room, I don't think the contract really matters.
And if that's the scenario we're setting up, and all the things that you say matter to him and are weighted in that way, which I think is totally
Ed Werder is not one of those like throw crap against the wall kind of guys. Like I'm guessing he got that list from his agent.
Absolutely. And if it's true, if it comes out that that's true, I think in that scenario, the Buffalo Bills should be the favorite in that scenario, because I think I was talking about with Pat Moran here this last week. There is more potential for J.J. Watt to come to the Bills and be a productive member of this team than any other team that's in contention for the Super Bowl, in my opinion. It's better set up for Watt to come here and be the best version of himself. It's the corny Sean McDermott line that they use over and over again. Obviously, they have the facilities for aging guys dealing with injuries, top of the line facilities here. They know how to treat those players. He fits the culture. There'd be no big culture changes here in Buffalo. You put him right in with the leadership here. He fills a need on the field that the Bills can use immediately, and they have other guys on this defense. This isn't just some poor defensive unit that is 5-6 players away from being at an elite level. They were pushing back towards an elite level before the playoffs. Like they've got the pieces to continue to be that. So I just think Watt coming to the Bills with all those things that you mentioned, competing for a Super Bowl, having the supporting cast, having a quarterback, all those things, if it really is what matters the most, I think. Obviously, there's a case to be made with Rodgers and Green Bay, but I don't think the supporting cast is there in this. I think the Buffalo Bills have a better team top to bottom than Green Bay Packers do. And they're right there. They're in the top probability-wise, and which is cool, man. It's cool for the
it's awesome.
Before free agency starts to be interested in you. Like, you have interest?
The fact that the number one most sought-after player were on the short list, and the one tiebreaker he's born in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and went to the University of Wisconsin, and his family grew up Packers fans. Like, there is a tug there, and the fact that they have Aaron Rodgers. I do think the rest of the team
and they were also
better, but they went to the
last game of the year.
Yeah, they went to the NFC Championship game too. So it is what it is. I think that's the final two for me. I don't think Pittsburgh. I made the case before, they can make it work. They need to do like 6 different moves to make it work, just to free up the money for him.
Their issue wasn't defense, right? Like that's what I mean when with Watt coming to Buffalo. I think it makes more of an impact. Like he goes to Pittsburgh, they still have a good defense. If he doesn't go, they still have a really good defense.
He won't be the reason their defense is good.
Exactly. And if they're going to get back into the Super Bowl kind of talk, they're going to need other assets. They can't do it with Big Ben. They're going to have to figure out something at quarter. So there's more questions in Pittsburgh. And so if he goes there, to me, it's immediately off the table that the Super Bowl and competing for a Super Bowl were the most important things.
I think that's fair. That's right. I had this argument with a bunch of people about how, Mike Tomlin's literally never had a losing season. They have they were 11-0 at one point, and yes, it was a hollow 11-0, but they were still 11-0 at one point. So I guarantee people like TJ Watt and Cam Hayward don't think they're rebuilding and don't think they can't win in the playoffs. So they're pitching him, JJ Watt, that, hey, he's the reason they're going to put him over the top. I think they're clearly in that third tier area. But whatever, it is what it is. So I think you're spot on. I think that JJ Watt has a chance. One, you couldn't build a player in a lab that's a better fit for Sean McDermott. Like, he is the carbon copy of every Sean McDermott cliche, all the things that we kind of would roll our eyes about the football guy stuff that JJ Watt does is perfect Sean McDermott. He would be the domino effect that would now give Jerry Hughes a valuable last season to let AJ Epinesa learn behind somebody, to unlock some pieces, playing games and stunts and twists with that Oliver, and really would have a chance to have that kind of impactful season. I think the narrative that would come, that that the direction you were going, the difference that he makes creates a really powerful narrative that he was the reason that the defense took that step. And I think that's intriguing to him. And I think it's not the same to the degree that Stephon Diggs unlocked the wide receiver room, but adding a top-of-the-line number 1 pass rusher that allows Jerry Hughes to be a number 2 and allows AJ Epinesa to not need to start and be a rotational guy and allows that Oliver not to be the one being double-teamed. J.J. Watt had the highest rate of being double-teamed of any edge defender in the NFL last year. So people talk about, he's, over the hill and stuff like that. He played more snaps last year than anyone on the Bills that wasn't in the secondary. Any front 7 player, he played more snaps than any of them. He played every game.
On a terrible team.
Yes. getting constantly double teamed on a terrible team, and he took nothing off. He was still, I think, the 7th rated pass rush player in the league. So I think it would be really exciting. I don't think he's the only guy they'll go after. I think there's plenty of other players they can pursue in different opportunities, but it's kind of fun that the top available player right now is interested in the Bills, and that there's a reason for him to have mutual interest.
Yeah, that was the thing that was most exciting to me, and I said it to my wife, like, every year a guy like this shakes loose from a team, and we all get excited on Twitter and Bills Mafia, and we're like, yeah, we want that guy, and then it comes out from his agent that he wants to play for a contender, and there might be some people that hold on and think that we still can get him, but the rest of us know as soon as it comes out that the guy wants to play for a contender, it wasn't going to be Buffalo. Like, it was already hard enough to get free agents in Buffalo, and then you throw in wanting to win a Super Bowl. That just wasn't in our cards. Now it is, and I heard people talking about warm weather and stuff like that. Like, the Bills have built something the right way that is attracting guys like JJ Watt. I think you nailed it when you couldn't create a player for Sean McDermott more than JJ Watt. And I joked around, I tweeted out after his thank you video, I joked around about he was thanking like the cafeteria workers and all the people in the building. And that's Sean McDermott. I can't tell you how many times he's talked about all the people in the building matter, and that knowing those people's names. And I guarantee you, when Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott saw that, they were sitting at each other like, yeah, let's go.
That's our dude.
That matters to them. Even if he doesn't come in and produce a double-digit sack season or have anything crazy, to have a guy that can be the starter is worth the money to be a starter, will add performance to your team, but can also keep the locker room going forward with the way that he can. That matters way more to Sean McDermott than I think the fans are realizing. So I wouldn't even be surprised if by the Bills' cap measure and what they have that they slightly overpaid for him, because they've had a precedent of overpaying for guys like this.
The message that he sends to the locker room is really powerful as well. Yeah. That, hey, there's no step back here. This is only, the all gas, no brakes, all that kind of stuff that they posted up. There's a couple other things from a roster construction standpoint. So Liam bringing up here that Watt wouldn't count against comp picks, and then a couple other folks, Tim talking about Chandler Jones, Hunter talking about if J.J. Watt signed with the Packers, would that free up Preston Smith? We're going to see a lot of those kind of names come up. So just a reminder for everybody, the compensatory pick formula is only people who are scheduled to be unrestricted free agents who sign in that first wave between the start of the league year in March 17th and usually May 15th. It's usually like 2 weeks after the draft. And so I'll use May 15th. That's what's been the last couple of years. That if you sign during there, then they do the net gain or add. Did you sign more than you lost, or did you lose more than you signed? If you lost more than you signed, how valuable were the guys you lost? And then they rank those by the size of the contract. The teams that lost more than they signed and have the highest contract guys get the highest comp picks. Anyone who was released will not count against that. So you even could play, comp pick bingo. You could go sign a released right tackle instead of Darrell Williams and a released linebacker instead of Matt Milano. Let them sign with somebody else and get comp picks plus pay to replace them. J.J. Watt would be included in that. Any released player doesn't count against that. So I don't know for sure that that's a primary focus. I don't think that's the reason that you do or don't sign people. Maybe it's a tiebreaker if they're looking at two different players, or if they get a little ways into free agency and they don't sign any big-time players. That could be a reason to hold out until May 15th. I think this year, more than any other year, you're going to have a whole bunch of those one-year contract free agent guys wait until after May 15th so they don't count against the comp pick formula. And I think a whole bunch of teams are going to sign a bunch of people that week after that cutoff.
Right.
So that's the update for right now. We thought we had an obligation to talk a little bit about is the hottest name around Bills Mafia, but now we'll dive into the topic for today. And we're going to do the same thing that we've done in our post-game shows all season long, and we did last week for the offense. We're going to do a season in review with the defense. We'll start the way we do every single show. We'll start up front with the defensive line. I know everybody threw around that stat from Spot Track that the Bills had the highest paid defensive line in the league. I always would poke holes in that. That doesn't count Von Miller, Khalil Mack, TJ Watt. They're all linebackers, even though all they do is rush the passer. So in reality, the Bills were a top 10 paid defensive line, but not number one in reality. And it was okay. I think that they've gotten a lot of bad press in that it was some terrible unit. And I think that you look at a lot of metrics that show the pass rush win rate and their ability to affect the passer was actually pretty good. They had a weird ratio of not being able to get home. And I think that was frustrating, and people now took that into they were bad, and I don't think they're actually bad.
No, I don't think it was a bad unit. I think they had some struggles early on. They changed a lot of pieces. That's one of the reasons that I know when we get into kind of the off-season mode, people look at that unit and the amount they're getting paid and just want to cut there and move on and get pieces. But depending on what next offseason looks like, too, that's going to be a tough one. I agree there's some cuts you can make there, but you're going to run into a similar issue of just putting a bunch of new parts together and them not knowing and taking 8 weeks to figure out, and there'll be some of those same frustrations. But as far as I think overall, they were successful. They were, DVOA at the end of the year, this was a top 10 defense overall. I don't think you have a bad defensive line if you're trending towards being the top 10 defense in the NFL. I think they were fine. Nobody really had that playmaker ability, but this is Jerry Hughes, maybe one of his best seasons.
It really
in the
was.
last 5
It was
years.
sneaky one of his best years.
And so he was like borderline. Again, maybe he hits home on a few more of those sacks, and we're talking about his season in a lot different way. But they had the pressures. They did impact the quarterback. I think they still need more guys. I think they will cut some guys and make improvements to this line, but I don't think it's as bad as it seems like on Bill's Twitter and some of the stuff that you read about how poor that unit played. I think they played well. I think Ed Oliver got a lot of being trashed on this year, which it felt weird. The biggest thing is I think Starr coming back or getting another type of one technique. I know we want to see it for the linebackers, and we'll get to those guys in a second, but I want to see Starr or Ed Oliver be able to not play out of position. I think for being asked to do what he's done, hats off to him to have to come in and fill that role. He's not built for that role.
No one played out of position more than Ed Oliver. He played more snaps out of position than any other player on the Bills roster this year. And, I thought Harrison Phillips came on as the year went. Yeah. Justin Zimmer was obviously kind of a pleasant surprise, certainly for the cheap value that he was. I think he'd be a nice rotational end of the rotation guy.
For sure.
I think the challenge is you look at the cheap contributions that Harrison Phillips and Justin Zimmer made. I think they were honestly pretty similar or on par to the contributions that Quentin Jefferson and Vernon Butler made. And it's rough to see that when you're paying Butler and Jefferson $8 million and you're seeing similar contributions from Phillips and Zimmer. I think that's where people get immediately to, nope, cut everybody and go over there. I don't know if it's quite that simple. Then you move into the defensive end, you add in Addison. I think a lot of people, their mock off season immediately starts with cut Addison, cut Butler, cut Jefferson. I will say I think it's very, very unlikely that all three of them are back. I also don't think it's that likely that all three are gone. I think Butler is the most obvious one. He has some guarantees that hit in his contract right at the beginning of the league year, 5 days into the league year on March 21st. He has $1 million roster bonus and $1.5 million of his contract is guaranteed. I kind of think Starr coming back is a bit of a 1-for-1 with him at the one tech.
Sure.
That's an easy $6.8 million to get back. I don't really want to cut Quentin Jefferson. I think if we add Starr, we can let Quentin Jefferson do what he was intended to do, which is be a backup to Ed Oliver at 3-tech and a rotational defensive end that can also play snaps there, not playing out of position at 1-tech. And then we'll get to Addison in a moment, but I know you're a fan of Jefferson, and certainly Eric is as well.
Yeah, I just don't. There's also a fine point. I think people get a little bit loose with just saying, hey, free up all this cap space, and then we'll just go get the other things we need. And
those other things cost money.
It all costs money, and you're just making more holes in places that you already need help, right? Like we're clamoring for defensive linemen, and I'm fine with cutting Butler. I agree. It is a 1-for-1 with Starr Lotulelei. Essentially, you're going to get Starr back here, and that's fixes a lot of the other problems, like Quentin Jefferson's problem, like the lack of production at Oliver's problem. So I think just those, say that one move and getting Starr back, then you really only have to make one move on this defensive line. And then Watt feels fine. Then I don't need to spend.
And if we do go out and get a guy, if we J.J. Watt or some people like Carl Lawson or people have talked about Von Miller or whoever, or Chandler Jones gets cut or Preston Smith gets cut, whoever. If a guy comes available and we add him at one of those spots, I do think they would be a one-for-one swap like we're saying Butler is with Starr. So if we sign J.J. Watt tomorrow, I got bad news about Mario Addison.
Right.
He's not going to be retained. Totally. If we don't sign someone, he's the kind of guy you go to and you restructure the deal. And hey, can we get a little bit of money back here this year? You're not going to get that on the open market. They can have a lot of those conversations like they did with Starr and like they did with Tyler Kroft and like they did with Patrick DeMarco last year. They're going to have a ton of those conversations. But cutting guys to create a hole that you also have to fill defeats some of the purpose. Some of them, the number is just too much that it's going to be considered, like Butler, and we talked about John Brown last week, that there are ways you can do that without creating a hole to get some of that money back.
Totally. I agree. And I'm reading one of the questions here. Did Zimmer play well enough to stay on the 53, or does he follow the practice squad here by Taylor?
Right there at that borderline.
Yeah, I think we'll see this summer. I think they want to probably see how he comes back from an offseason. I'm sure they gave him particular things to do and work on his game to come back. And I think if he checks all those boxes, I think he's definitely trending in the right way. I think he played well enough for me to feel confident in him being on the 53. If he comes back in shape and is doing the things the coaches want, continues to trend in that direction, I'm all for it. But I do need to see more than what we saw out of him before I handed him a roster spot.
And we do this every year. I put out the numbers the last 3 years. Bills fans always go overboard that, oh my gosh, anyone that we cut, we're going to lose all of them and they're all going to get claimed. And I believe the number is right around 8% of the players that we've released have been claimed by other teams. So, if he's the 9th defensive lineman, the Bills' 9th defensive lineman goes back and forth between the practice squad and the roster, and he's that kind of guy. I don't think that if we cut him, he's the first guy that's going to get claimed. I think that there's a chance they can move him back and forth. If they don't make any other additions and he's our 8th defensive lineman and 4th defensive tackle, I'm not going to throw a fit. I think he's capable of being that 4th guy. If we need him for more than that, I think that's a problem. I think that he's a fringe roster guy that can contribute in a couple rotational roles, but I don't want more than 15% of snaps from someone like him.
Totally. Yeah, I'm with that.
The edge guys, before we move into linebacker, obviously we talked about what a great season Jerry Hughes had. Both of us have taken plenty of medicine on Trent Murphy in the kind of season that, I think he's going to move on. I do think that I was listening to one of the lockdown shows with Joe Marino, and he said, if there's no market for him, would you be shocked if Sean McDermott brought him back on a veteran minimum contract to compete for a roster spot?
Totally.
And I've joked the whole time, if Trent Murphy was an undrafted free agent and had the exact same production that he has the last couple of years, there'd be a freaking Trent Murphy fan club. Like, people would love him. It's just that we expected more because of the contract. So if he comes back at a veteran minimum contract and just makes $1 million, I don't think anyone would be furious if he was the 4th defensive end rotating in with somebody else. But we're planning on a step forward from Epinesa. That's going to be the big difference in this short of adding a J.J. Watt kind of player. Sure. This team only gets better by having a major step forward from A.J. Epinesa.
For sure. A couple things. That the fan in me is totally cool with what they paid Trent Murphy for them to win against the Ravens in the playoffs and have that impact. I'll pay that 10 times over 10 to have the season that we had, but I get it. I'll take my lumps with Trent Murphy. But yeah, I would take him back on a veteran minimum as a rotational defensive player. Sure. I think that's where he is at this point in his career. Epinesa, I kind of like where he's trending.
He ended the season really well.
He ended the season well. He looked a lot faster than we were told to expect. I think the weight loss really helped him to add some explosiveness to his game, and I think that was kind of a problem on tape for him in college. So super excited to see how he comes back here the second year, because I think he had a slow start, and I'm expecting a big jump here for him right at the start. But I don't think the Bills can go into OTAs and things like that with just him across from Jerry Hughes. I think that'd be a disservice to Hughes And I think that would be a pretty big liability for this defense moving into a season to just have him slotted as the starter without knowing where he's going to be into that sophomore jump.
And he didn't play a ton early in the season. Once you got to that Chargers game coming out of the bye through the rest of the year, he was a core piece of that rotation. Yeah. And through the rest of that season, he had nice production. You're talking about he had another 14 pressures over those games and was in there contributing, was able to make some plays, and you saw flashes from him consistently. So I'm optimistic about his future. Mario Addison, I think, is in between. I think Mario Addison played better than Quentin Jefferson or Vernon Butler, but we also paid him more, and he was the guy we talked about 4 straight seasons of 9.5 or 10 sacks. I was kind of hoping for more than the 4 sacks that he had, or 5 sacks that he had. I would like to see a little bit more from that kind of production, and I think that I won't be furious if he's back next year, but I won't be sad if we find a way to upgrade from Mario Addison.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I was saying to you earlier, I've had a really hard time this year with the Bills finding any hot takes for free agency or the draft, and this is sort of along the same lines with all these guys on the defensive line. Sure, if there's a way to upgrade and do it cheaper, sign me up. If we're bringing these guys back, they're all going to come back on cheaper. I don't think any of these guys are coming back with the type of cap hit that they had previously. Correct. I think they're coming back with cheaper deals. So the type of production that they actually had on a cheaper deal, I'm totally cool with that. I think that would be a successful year for the Bills in free agency if they got that kind of production for less money. If they find a way to replace these guys, if they can get J.J. Watt, see ya. Yeah. Thanks for your service.
Wish you all the best.
I don't know what else to say. If they whiff on J.J. Watt and none of these other guys really shake out and it ends up being more like NBA trade deadline where none of the things you want end up happening, I'm fine with the Bills sort of running it back to a degree. I think they can add in the draft and build for the future at some of these positions as well. So I think they're in a good position, man. This is a team that was close to getting to the Super Bowl that if they can rework some of these deals and run it back, if that's the worst case scenario, man, so that's the best worst free agency we've had in years. Go back to being a really good team.
So quick shout out for you. Mike loves the background you put together. So Aaron does most of our graphics on the show. I agree. I think this one's fantastic. Looks really good. Sure. For anyone who's listening to the show, he made a really cool background with some neon lights that look nice. And Aaron M on here, it's never wrong to bring up Yannick Ngakoue. That's always a good thing to bring up. He is a free agent, and honestly, I think PFF had him mocked going to the Bills. So I don't know for sure that he's the next number 1 option behind J.J. Watt, but they understand that pass rush was not good enough here, and I do expect some investment, whether that's a premium draft pick or a free agent signing. I expect a material investment in pass rush going into this year from one of those spots.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. Yannick's going to be a tough one, man, because he's still young enough.
He's going to want more money than Watt.
He's going to want, Watt's already had his massive contract.
Yeah, he's made over $100 million.
Yeah, he's good.
He can afford to take a pay cut.
And his pay cut will still be afford to pay me. Yeah.
Yeah, so an 8-digit number.
Correct. But Yannick's this is his opportunity.
Correct.
He might even get a 1-2 year deal just because of how weird the world is right now and with this cap space. But he only has an opportunity for 1 or 2 more deals. So I don't know that the Bills are going to be all in on a guy that's got a market for a younger person that's getting a little out of control. They want to fix that position, but I don't think Bean wants to get caught with his pants down right now, overspending. Those days are over of taking those giant risks.
Yeah, Cole bring this up. One of the PFF mock articles literally had us re-signing Milano, re-signing Darrell Williams, and adding 4 huge pieces, and it was over $60 million in cap space. So I have no idea how they possibly thought
I would to do that.
But yeah, it was re-sign Milano, re-sign Williams, add Ngakoue and Jonnu Smith and Chris Carson and Richard Sherman.
I'll take Richard Sherman on that.
And I was like, sure. I all right. I don't know where Brandon Bean found a magic lamp and a genie in the bottle somewhere, but whatever. Moving into linebackers, obviously everyone's talking ad nauseum about Matt Milano, but there were other solid players here. We saw a tale of two seasons with Tremaine Edmonds playing early, injured, and then trying to overcompensate for Milano being out. We saw AJ Klein, who played horrendous and then really well, and then back to just kind of okay. We saw a small flash from Terrell Dodson. Andre Smith played special teams. Tyler Medikevich only played special teams. There's not a ton of depth here. We don't have an obvious answer on the roster. If we lose Matt Milano, I don't think we have. We do. In fact, I know we don't have a player that can step in and just play all the snaps that Milano played as a 100% snap guy. But I don't quite know the answer. So, I don't think any of the players played phenomenally. This wasn't Matt Milano's best season. Part of that was injury. Tremaine Edmonds had some flashes late, but looked pretty rough early on. AJ Klein won some people over with that monster game against Seattle and then played pretty well, but struggled again down the stretch. This was not a strength of the team in an area that we expected to probably be a bigger strength.
Definitely. I am sort of gotten to the place on the kind of even the whole Milano Darrell Williams, because that sort of is a interconnected argument that we're all having. I'm on the camp that I think Matt Milano is more of a priority for the Bills to bring back, in that I think he's harder to replace. I really do think that if you might be able to get some athletic freak that fits the mold of what you're looking for at linebacker in the draft, but I don't know that you're going to get 2021 production that you would get out of Matt Milano. And I think at right tackle, I think you can get a guy at 30 that can come in, and the drop-off of production might not be as vast as it was from Darrell Williams to whoever at 30 versus wherever you end up drafting a linebacker to replace Matt Milano, getting that type of early production on the defensive side of the ball. It's just not something we see year in and year out for a guy to step in and do that. And I think this team is built to really take a shot at a Super Bowl here in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think Matt Milano is a bigger part of that potential than Darrell Williams. Now, you don't get Darrell Williams. It's a huge hole. I'm not understating the hole that right tackle becomes. I just think that in terms of drop-off and potential, in my opinion, for production in 2021, I think bringing back Milano is a better chance at matching the production that you lose in Darrell Williams. If that makes sense.
Well, and I think another piece of that is it's undeniable. Tremaine Edmonds is a different player with Matt Milano next to him than without him.
Totally.
Now, I would love for that not to have to be the case, and that for him to be able to step into his full potential with or without that running mate. But to this point, in the early first 3 years of his career, it's night and day when he plays with or without Matt Milano. I think that Milano people ended with a bad taste in their mouth because, hey, let me let you in on a little secret. No linebacker in the NFL can cover Travis Kelce, and all of them looked bad against it. And if your threshold of whether we re-sign or retain a linebacker or not, or any team does, is can you shut down Travis Kelce, then no linebacker in the NFL would ever get re-signed. So
yeah,
I get
it'd
it.
be like asking two guards in the 90s, like, can you stop Michael Jordan from scoring 20 points a game?
Yeah.
None of us can. Sorry.
Or deciding whether a cornerback gets signed, whether or not he can shut down Stephon Diggs. It's just not how it works. Like, it's just, that's not a fair threshold. So yes, I get it that the last game we saw Matt Milano wasn't good, and Travis Kelce ripped us up, and that space over the middle was a problem all year long. Eric did a big breakdown on, and even Max helped us do some work on how crazy the shift was of tight end production over the middle, tore up the Bills all season long, and a piece of that was Matt Milano not being healthy. But he's still our best weapon against that. Like, you're not better without him. You're not going to go find somebody else who's better. He's still a top 5 coverage linebacker in the NFL and has been rated as such over the last 3 years. And I'm torn. I can tell myself a story of how they can cobble together the production, kind of a Moneyball style of maybe they do find that big nickel or third safety dime player plus maybe they try a Keanu Neal or Jaquiski Tart, who was kind of a strong safety, but could be cover, more of a linebacker style, and AJ Klein on some downs, or a rookie on some downs. And instead of one guy playing 100% of snaps, it's four guys playing 25% of the snaps, and you cobble together that role. It's not crazy. I don't know that you're going to get the consistency. Communication is so important in that area, and I struggle to think that we're going to have somebody who can build that communication and that kind of cohesive web that back seven becomes with having to rotate different people into that spot. So I like the idea on paper. I'm nervous of how practical it is, and my ideal scenario is that maybe Matt Milano kind of loses out on some of the musical chairs of the teams willing to pay big money at linebacker, and we get him back at a slightly better number than people expect. Maybe more 10, 11, 12 million instead of the 13, 14, 15 million, and they figure out a way to make it work. And I think that's the best case for everybody.
I have a feeling, and this is based on nothing but my own sitting around thinking about Matt Milano too much, that he's going to get to free agency. I think that Bean was very honest about that, go out. But I think Bean knows that the market will dry up, I think, for a little bit for Matt Milano. I think the injury history, teams are going to use that against him in negotiations. I don't
Whether it's fair or not, they're going to use it negotiation-wise.
There's no team out there that wants to pay Milano $15 million a year or $13 million a year. Like, they don't want it. They want to get the best deal that they can to get good players. This is a business. And he's not so good that he's necessarily going to be a franchise-altering type player.
He's going to have to choose taking a huge payday from the Jets or the Jaguars, or taking a lot of money from the Bills.
Right. And I think that he can probably get another 2-year deal or something just to get another taste at free agency in a couple of years when the cap isn't COVID dropped and there's not all these weird things. We saw some report saying that they're expecting a lot of 1-2 year deals here with unknown circumstances with the cap and how that's going to impact the NFL long term. So I see a scenario where his market isn't there like he and his agent think. Brandon Beane kind of knows that, and he's saying, yeah, we'll let him test, and then we'll get him back, like you said, on a thing that's a little bit more team-friendly deal. But somebody in here asks, Aaron M. says, what's Milano's ceiling? And I think that's really one of the things that's really important here is, if healthy, Matt Milano's a Pro Bowl. I don't know if we care about Pro Bowl, but
the year before, I thought he was the snub in the way that Jordan Boyer was the snub this year.
Yes, and I'm not going to ever come out and say Matt Milano would be an All-Pro at his position, but he'll be in the conversation of the top guys at his position when healthy, and I think his ceiling is right there in that top 5 to 10 guys at his position, and that's important. And you brought up the comment of maybe having some type of patchwork together. And there's a situation, I think that's what they're working on behind the scenes is, okay, we don't have him. How do we fix this up as much as we can here to, until we find something to replace? But Sean McDermott wants a guy, like you said, communication. He wants a guy that's going to be playing 99% of the snaps with Tremaine Edmonds so that the communication's flawless. The passing off between defensive backs is flawless. I don't think they want to patch it together throughout the season. So again, everything in my body's telling me that Milano's more of a priority for the Bills, and they're kind of just playing a little go see that market, and we'll be here with $12 million when you're ready.
Yeah. And I think for any fans that aren't aware, there's a tier of linebacker that's Darius Leonard, Fred Warner, Bobby Wagner, maybe now Devin White or Levante David.
Totally.
And they are in a tier above Matt Milano. He's legitimately in that next tier. He's legitimately in that 6th to 12th best linebackers there from a coverage standpoint.
I think Edmonds can be too.
Edmonds has higher potential. So, yeah. I mean, let's move to him. You'll hear it coming up here in the awards ceremony. I was really disappointed in Tremaine Edmonds because I had the expectation he was going to take a step into defensive player of the year kind of level, in that, Pro Bowl in his second year, freak athlete, just turning 22, at that point thinking he was going to have the strong defensive line in front of him, keeping him clean. And, he got hurt. He lost Milano. The defensive line didn't keep him clean. But then even when he was fully healthy, he didn't clean up some of the tackling issues. He didn't clean up some of the over pursuit issues. He still had some of the phenomenal, when he does have the right read and go sideline to sideline, his size and speed and wingspan is breathtaking. It's unbelievable what he can do. He hasn't been able to harness it yet to do it consistently enough. And I was disappointed, not because he was a bum or played terrible. I was disappointed because I thought he was going to be phenomenal. And I still think there's that potential, but it has planted the seed of doubt in my mind that, hey, we've seen 3 seasons now. Maybe this is what he is. Pretty good with awesome flashes, but also some frustrating disappointment. And I can't tell if it's the 3 seasons telling me that, or if it's okay to think that, well, he was the youngest player in history to be drafted and that he's still just turning 23 and he can clean that stuff up.
Yeah, I get where you're feeling with that. This whole season, really across this defense was so odd. And obviously you can say that about everything with the 2020 season. But I'm saying in terms of, they talk about how hard it is to have top 5 defensive success year in and year out, that if you're a top 5 defense, it's unlikely you're going to be able to repeat that type of statistical success. And I think this year for the Buffalo Bills sort of proved why that some of that's true is there's so much luck involved in health that we have seen from the year before. We saw that Tremaine Edmonds comes in, hurts himself in the first half of the first game of the season, and then has to play through that injury, and that's not something that's fun to play through. And I think there was probably parts of the season early on where they weren't sure if he was going to be able to play through it, or they should just have him get a surgery and be ready for the playoffs type of thing. They weren't really sure where to go with that. He played through it, luckily, because Milano also got hurt. So you have all these things sort of working against the success of that group and really this whole defense going into it. And we talked about it with the defensive line, new defensive line. Starla Tulele opts out. This is an argument that you and I and Eric have had with people for a number, or at least a couple of years, about Starla Tulele's impact and what that means for the linebackers. I think we saw it in a major way when he wasn't here. It's one of those, you don't know what you got till it's gone. Yeah. Things to Starla Tulele. So I think that then, not having a true 1 technique really hurt the linebackers. You take Milano away from him. He doesn't have a 1 technique. The defensive line took weeks to gel. Like, all these things mattered. Taryn Johnson had a really tough start to the year in coverage. Those things matter with linebackers. So there's a lot of context to why Tremaine Edmonds' season looked the way that it did. I think he was trending in the right direction for the year. I think that matters, that he had a lot of that adversity and trended in the right direction for the most part of the year. But I agree with you. There's some things that are continually frustrating that are still showing up that aren't quite fixed yet. I'm not necessarily giving him a pass because of all those things and an excuse, but I think it needs to, some of the evaluation on him needs to be weighted as to what context existed around him in this defense this year, if that makes sense.
And I think one of the big decision points is I am 100% ready to exercise the 5th-year option on Tremaine Edmonds. I'm not ready to extend him yet.
Sure.
So I think that's where I am in that, hey, he has way too much potential. He's shown way too many flashes. Of course, we want to pick up the 5th-year option, which means we have 2 more seasons to evaluate him. He'll be in his 4th year of his rookie year, and then the 5th year, which for him will be age 23 and 24 seasons. That's an awesome situation to be in. And then we decide whether we're ready to extend him to a big money deal. And I think there's potential that we are going to be ecstatic and ready to do that, and there's a chance that he's going to be in the middle of that, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, totally. That's why the 5th-year option exists. That's why you have the right to exercise it.
Switching gears into the secondary here, we'll start with the easiest group. The safeties were phenomenal. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde again stayed healthy the entire season, played every single snap the whole season long. Dean Marlowe actually got more snaps than he had previously and played a pretty decent chunk of third safety. Jaquan Johnson was purely special teams kind of guy and just break glass in case of emergency. Some people like his potential. I think he's just a depth guy. But the safeties were stellar. And probably one of the most underrated strengths of this entire team with that cohesion and the flexibility between Jordan and Micah.
Definitely. It's underrated is exactly how it should be described. I think, Poyer not getting in the Pro Bowl was a snub. I think he should also be considered for All-Pro the way he plays. I doesn't necessarily always show up in stats, but he had stats right there with everybody else that gets those, honors and things like that. Poyer and Hyde have played to the point where I think it's the most important part of this defense. Yeah. I think that they cause so many problems for the opposing quarterback, for the opposing defensive coordinators, that they're the most important part of this defense. And as long as that group is together, for me, I think this defense is going to be trending always towards top 10 in the NFL, as long as that core is together. What scares me about it is that depth. Marlowe was fine. I think Sean McDermott loves him. He'll definitely stay probably as long as nobody comes in.
I'd feel better if he was our fourth guy than our third guy, but
totally. They need to really start considering what happens in a life after Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, or when one of them gets hurt, right? We're starting to hit the probability of how many seasons they play together where they're both not going to finish every season they play together.
Poyer's about to turn 30 and plays with reckless abandon. Totally. Micah, is a little bit more.
He's gotten hobbled a few times.
He's also 30, and he's actually had more injuries than Poyer has. So it's tough. They're both going into age 30. Safety is a position that does age more gracefully than others in the NFL. It's very reasonable to think that we could have 3 more seasons with the two of them at a pretty high level. That's probably the high end. That's probably the best case scenario is 3 more seasons with them. So you have to start planning for that now, and that's one of these next 2 years in the draft, and then maybe some free agency to be able to sprinkle in some of those pieces.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just don't want – I agree with you in the sense of Marlowe being kind of that fourth guy. I would just if one of these guys goes out, even if it's a concussion and they're out for the game, we saw with the COVID stuff where guys had to play – I don't really love leaning on Marlowe for an entire game. It worked. You can get by a game or two, but the depth at that position concerns me. But I think the tandem, in my opinion, on that side of the ball, if we've got those guys, I feel like you can really almost sort of patch together a lot of the rest of it and still be pretty much a top 10 NFL defense.
Well, and if the game that Micah missed wasn't the New England game, we probably would have seen a lot more of Dean Marlowe exposed than what we did. Sure. He's great when all you need to do is come up and support and run support. He didn't have to go back in coverage all that much against the Patriots in that game. So we were probably pretty fortunate that the one that Micah Hyde missed was the Patriots.
Yeah.
To the cornerbacks, obviously we have the luxury that Trey White's down season he was still really, really good and just not quite an all-pro level. He was still very, very good. Levi Wallace, I think maybe had one of the most underrated seasons of any defender for the Bills. Just a really solid year all year long. Also, I don't think Josh Norman was as bad as people made him out to be. People, don't get me wrong. I remember the Derrick Henry highlight like everybody else does. He was actually pretty good. He didn't get roasted by people. He didn't give up huge, big plays all the time. His quarterback rating against his, catch percentage and things like that of what he gave up was actually pretty solid and very competitive around the rest of the cornerbacks in the NFL. So he wasn't phenomenal, but he was pretty good. And then you get into the kind of rough start and phenomenal finish. Taryn Johnson was, right there with, the Tremaine Edmonds and AJ Kleins of the world of, that started really rough but ended phenomenal. And he probably ended better than any of them in the way that he finished that flurry into the Steelers game and through the playoffs, 2 of the biggest plays of the entire season. And his overall play was more than just those 2 big plays. And then obviously some of the depth pieces with Cam Lewis, Dane Jackson, Saran Neal, guys like that. But the secondary was the strength of the team. We talked about the safeties. We talked about, the cornerbacks here in today's NFL. It's impossible not to have, passing yards are going to happen. The Bills are in pretty darn good shape with the way the secondary is put together.
Yeah, actually, we were talking, again, off air before this, that I'm fine if they want to go after secondary in free agency or in the draft. Always give me a cornerback in the
every
draft.
Year.
Whatever, wherever you pick them. But I'm also fine with running this back. I really am. And that doesn't necessarily mean bringing back Norman. insert veteran free agent cornerback. I like Richard Sherman a lot.
Sure.
I'd love to see Richard Sherman on this team. I'm in team bring back Levi Wallace.
100%.
100%.
Levi Wallace is a restricted free agent. Now he's in a weird spot where he was undrafted, so we can't use the original round tender,
Right.
where technically then you could flag a guy for that, and if the team signs him, you get that pick back. We didn't pick him, so we don't get anything. So basically, they're going to have the choice of the second round tender, which is like $2.5 to $3 million, or the original round tender, where it's more like $1.5 or $2 million, but we get to match an offer if he gets one. So they're going to kind of be playing the game of chicken there of, hey, how much do we want to put out there? I won't be sad if they give him the second round tender and just do the $2.5 million and bring him back on that. That's still a great deal for what he is, and then you figure it out later on.
Yeah, for that deal, I think if you look league wide and you take away his name, just take away the name Levi Wallace, and you look league wide at his peers, I don't know that there's a cornerback that you're getting for $2.5 million next year that's going to do the type of production that he gave you a year ago in this defense. And we talk about communication being important. Like, he knows how to communicate with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. He knows how to pass stuff off to Taryn Johnson and the linebackers. Like, he's embedded into this defense. This is the scheme he knows. He's a technician. He really is. Like, he's always in guys' space. He's not super aggressive at the point of attack, and I know that frustrates a lot of fans. He got better as the year went on. When he got called out for it, he came back and was more aggressive. He increased his tackling efficiency. He was like the best tackler on the Bills this year, both in run support and in the pass game, and that's important to me. You hit on it. This is a passing league. We're seeing record-shattering passing stats year in and year out. Average quarterbacks are putting up 4,000-yard seasons nowadays. Like, it's regular. Guys are giving up yards. Every cornerback in the league is also giving up yards. It's not just a Levi Wallace problem. But being able to tackle a guy after you give up yards is important. Yards after catch kills defenses. Levi Wallace isn't giving you that. He's steady. Like I said, I'm all for bringing in another vet. I'm all for drafting a guy, but I think this position is the best position depth-wise, top talent-wise on the team. I'm excited about Cam Lewis. I'm excited about Dane Jackson. I still like Taryn Johnson quite a bit. I still think this is a deep unit that doesn't need a whole lot. Like, bring back Norman if that's the case. If he wants to stay here and you can get him a better deal, bring back Josh Norman. But I don't need any major shakeups at this position, in my opinion, for it to be one of the better units in the league.
So I just looked. The numbers for Levi Wallace are $3.3 million for the second round tender and $2.3 million for the original round tender. If we do original round, we wouldn't get any compensation back, but we would be able to match a contract. Obviously, no team is going to sign Levi Wallace and give us a second round pick. So if you did the 3.3, you would basically guarantee he's on the team for the year. No one's going to sign him for a contract and give us a second round pick. So it's basically we rolled the dice with 2.3 million and we could match if someone signs him, or we do 3.3 million and we get to keep him for sure. Between that $1 million difference, I won't be upset if they just do the second round tender and just make sure that they keep him. Cornerbacks are valuable in today's NFL.
Totally. Somebody talks about here, how do we improve team speed on defense? And I think
this is an area where that's a reasonable
It's
request.
a fair question, especially having played the Chiefs and seeing what they were able to do to them. I'm not super concerned about the team speed as much as I am about the scheme and how they deploy. I was actually more, I think lack of speed wasn't the problem against the Chiefs. Lack of physicality against the Chiefs. They
didn't jam them at the line at all.
They didn't jam them at the line, and not just cornerbacks, physical up front. I think they lost both the trenches. I think
you saw it in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, they didn't jam them. When you see teams that go and push back and bully a team like the Chiefs, I think that's where you have success. The Bills just were not the more physical team. Yeah. So I think you can make up for some speed. I think speed in the NFL is a lot closer than people think. When you have a guy that doesn't necessarily run the 40 that you expect him to at a position, I think like Taryn Johnson's not a fast guy, but when he got that pick six, Juju Smith-Schuster wasn't catching them. Like some of these, like they're still fast athletes. If they're in position, if they're schemed the right way, if they're playing physical, I think you can sort of offset some of the lack of speed things, especially in the type of zone defenses that the Bills run. I think that makes up for a lot of that lack.
And I think, that's why I might lean more towards, if we're doing the veteran route, a Jason Verrett, a Patrick Peterson, I wouldn't mind leaning a little more towards the athleticism side. Richard Sherman would be a great fit, but I wouldn't hate leaning that direction for a little bit more explosion. And I don't mind it. I won't care if they use the first-round pick on a cornerback. If that's where they want to invest, a top 3, day 1, day 2 pick, and that they want that guy to develop with Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson, that's great. I know there's a huge fan base for Dane Jackson out there. I don't think he's materially better than Levi Wallace. I think he could be Levi Wallace. I think that he has the chance and upside to be a starting caliber corner that has limitations, and that you're going to see him one-on-one coverage against elite athletes at the receiver position who will expose him, and then play in, play out. He's mainly going to do his job and do a pretty good job, and I won't be upset if he becomes a starter for this team in the future. He's not an elite athlete. He's not the answer to these questions, but I'm glad he's on the team, and he's good depth. He's a nice luxury to have as a fourth cornerback.
I would love to see him and Levi compete for that job next year. I'm super excited to see that camp battle. But again, Levi's a guy they've been trying to replace here. We talk about this now for like 3 years. They've been trying to replace Levi Wallace, and they have not been able to. And even during the season, but he continues, like I think you said, sneaky to put up really decent numbers, especially in context of being opposite of Trey White, a guy that does shut down balls thrown his way. So that's a tough position to be in, and I think that he does more than a fine job. Am I open to an upgrade? Absolutely. Upgrade everybody that you can. But I do think that this unit is maybe better to come back and run it back maybe than any of the units on the team. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so as well. A couple areas we want to get to before we close out here tonight. Special teams was a great step forward this year. I thought Heath Farwell acquitted himself really, really well. It's silly to think that didn't have a direct impact from the investments they made, bringing in Taiwan Jones, bringing in Tyler Medikevich, claiming people like Jake Kumaro, getting contributions from people. You're talking about guys who normally don't play that. Having AJ Epinesa and Daryl Johnson be consistently contributing special teamers is a nice bonus. Andre Smith was playing a ton of snaps for them. They made, key contributions in that area, and I think some of the players that they have there, Saran Neal, guys like that, Reggie Gilliam, Jaquan Johnson are core special teamers and a big part of this. Taiwan Jones is a free agent. Tyler Medikevich contract is in question. I think a lot of people look at that big, cut Medikevich. But I'd kind of like to have him back. If you like how well the special teams played, you should like Tyler Medikevich. He was a big piece of that. He played the most special team snaps of anyone on the team. He was on every single unit. He made a consistently good contribution across the board. It's something that you should want him on this team. I hope maybe they can, mess around and clean up his contract a little bit. But the coverage units were a big bonus, compared to years past.
Totally, yeah. I love this unit. I do think there's going to be some interesting stuff coming up with the unit itself, because I think this next year or two, you really want to start having the guys you've developed, your Saran Neals, your Bam Johnsons, to be your Manikeviches, your guys that you don't need to bring in, not big name, but top special teams free agent guys.
Taiwan Jones and Tyler Medikevich might have been the two biggest special teams free agent additions in the NFL.
Yeah, and if you can develop your own guys, you don't need to go out and get these other guys. So I think Saran Neal is trending in that direction. I think that he could be a top special teams guy in the league. I think he has that ability. Especially
a year mentoring with Taiwan Jones.
Yeah, Bam Johnson showed quite a bit of nice stuff. I think there's opportunities for some of the guys on the roster here to step into some of those roles. But I think you're going to start to lose some of the veterans that they've brought in throughout the years here to be special teams contributors, but it's coming from in-house.
We lost a lot of the perspective. Andre Smith was a 2018 draft pick. He's 23.
Sure.
So that trade with the Panthers, he's still a very young guy on a very cheap contract.
Yeah, he'll stick around.
And he was a big piece of that as well. He played right there. He was top 5 in snaps played on special teams. So some of those guys, I do agree that, hey, you need the Reggie Gilliams and the Andre Smiths and the Bam Johnsons, Jaquan Johnson, Saran Neal to step into those. So you don't need to spend the extra money on that. But one more year coming back here.
Sure.
From a return standpoint, I still think it's most likely that we have Andre Roberts back on probably a veteran minimum contract. I don't think you can afford to pay him bigger money. I don't think it's crazy that they bring back Isaiah McKenzie, and I think there's a non-zero chance that in the draft or free agency we combine Isaiah McKenzie and Andre Roberts into one roster spot. We joked before, and you were even joking that Eric would give you a hard time. He was actually excited about the idea of Cordarrelle Patterson. The Cordarrelle Patterson literally is Isaiah McKenzie plus Andre Roberts plus TJ Yeldon all in one. And that, that kind of guy I think is possible. And you've seen different draft, crushes get thrown out there of those return gadget guys. I think it's more likely we see a Roberts or McKenzie back. I don't think it's a guarantee.
It might not be a guarantee. Here's where I'm at with it. I think if it's not Roberts or McKenzie, which I think it's going to be Roberts, I'm not sold on McKenzie just because he had that Miami return. That doesn't sell me on him being a returner. So I'd have to see more. And then same thing with the draft. I know those gadget guys are fun, and it is fun to think about adding new pieces, but I still prefer proven NFL production. I think right now with the special teams, I just said the guys on their team need to step up, but I don't know that they're going to rely a ton on a rookie to come in and be the returner. I think Sean McDermott's gone through enough issues at that spot with, Isaiah McKenzie not being able to hold on to the ball, his first attempt at being a returner, to then having to use Micah Hyde just to hold on to the ball and not getting anything out of the return. Seeing the dimension that Andre Roberts gives them and the type of field position that he's given them throughout his past couple of years here, I think that they want that. So even if it's not Andre Roberts, I think a Cordarrelle Patterson's very much in play. And I don't think any of these guys are going to break the bank to end up on a team that's a competitor. So, I'm totally team bring back Andre Roberts. If not, let's get a Cordarrelle Patterson and kill a bunch of birds with one stone.
Well, and even some of the other guys that people bring up, you got to remember, guys like Mecole Hardman was a second-round pick. That wasn't like some cheap investment. Like, he was a second-round pick from the Chiefs to be that gadget guy and return guy. So we'll see where that goes. Obviously, from a kicking standpoint, the Bills are in fantastic position. They have the youngest combination of kicker and punter in the NFL. They had the kicker who broke the rookie scoring record and the punter who averaged the most at yards per punt.
And almost didn't qualify because
and almost had so few punts that he didn't qualify. So oddly, Corey Bajorkas is also a restricted free agent because we messed around back and forth trying to replace him for 3 straight years, and then we finally had a good season here. I'm happy to have him back. He's going to be brought back at a pretty cheap tender, but that's fine. So he'll probably cost us $2 million is my guess on the restricted free agent tender. Tyler Bass is on his great rookie cheap deal. So I'm happy with them. I don't want to go through that carousel again. We had nice kickers all season long. I don't want to worry about that.
Yep. No, I don't want to talk about it. I just like the consistency of not having to sit around and be mad at kickers
at all. And honestly, one that to kind of really close out the last segment here was for coaching. I was expecting to have to talk about replacing guys, and somehow out of all the different things that happen, all the rumors for, Leslie Frazier and Brian Dable and Ken Dorsey and all the other guys that interviewed for spots, we lost an assistant linebacker coach that I didn't know existed. When I heard his name that he got a job, I was like, oh, I didn't know that gentleman existed. It's awesome that they're bringing back the entire coaching staff. I think that continuity and development is fantastic. And now going into a maybe slightly more regular off season, I'm really excited about what they can do going into this next season.
I think that also sells to free agents. I think that excites people about this organization. I can't think of, obviously you're going to have KC's probably going to run it back. We're not sure what's going to happen in Tampa Bay. They're probably going to run it back. But I think in terms of consistency, Bills have to be up there right now in the NFL with what they have put together, being in the AFC Championship game a year ago, bringing everything back, pretty much they're going to be able to run it back, at least from a coaching perspective. They'll definitely be bringing it all back. I think that matters to when you're pitching a guy like J.J. Watt. Yeah. And saying, hey, we have Leslie Frazier, well-respected guy around the league. We have Eric Washington, a guy that's been a defensive coordinator before. Like, we have all these guys in place. We've proven success with this defense. Come play for us. Like, we've got it all lined up and just need you. I think that matters to a lot of players to come into a place that's stable, especially look at what J.J. Watt just went through. Total instability, some of the most unstable franchising I've seen in quite some time. So I think it matters to those guys, and totally unbelievable that neither Frazier nor Dable ended up getting a head coaching job. Towards the end there, man, after the Bills got bounced from the playoffs, I thought for sure any day I would hear Leslie Frazier was going to the Houston Texans. I was almost convinced of it after they got bumped out of the playoffs. So get those guys back, man, is incredible. It's not going to last long. Somebody's going to leave here in the next year. So they have a small window to keep this together and try to do something.
Absolutely. To close things out for the show, we'll do our final season awards. We'll start with Defensive Player of the Year. Who did you have as your Defensive Player of the Year?
This one's a really tough one for me. Yeah. I've honestly been flipping like a pancake in my head all day. I think now that I'm on the show live, I'm going to go with Jordan Poyer. I think I'm going with Jordan because I don't think he got the respect that he deserved this season for the type of season he had. No one was talking about him. He just did it, went about his work quietly. He doesn't get the recognition that he deserves. So for me, he gets Defensive Player of the Year for the lack of recognition that he gets anywhere else.
I went with Poyer as well. I think that, in the sense of you can pick Jordan or LeBron to be the MVP every year, but it kind of gets boring to pick that. You could always give it to Trey. He's probably our most valuable or best defensive player. I think Jordan arguably had a better season than Trey this year, and I think Jerry Hughes deserves recognition as well.
Jerry was my pancake.
Yeah, 66 guy. Pressures, the performance that he had, I think he deserved that. And but I think Jordan Poyer is the right pick for that. I'm going to let you say most improved because I'm pretty sure I know the answer.
So this one's also tough for me because I went my comeback player of the year in the last episode was Harrison Phillips.
Yep.
And I think that there's still a strong case for him, but I think I'm going to go with Taryn Johnson because that's where my takes have been all year. And
it's the right choice.
You really, I didn't want to get too much into it with the defensive back talk, but you really did nail it that he had those struggles, was benched. He came back, and I think people remember those picks, but he played pretty well outside of those picks. And those were great clutch plays, but he was on a pretty good streak of playing pretty well for who he was, to the point that right when he was about to get benched, nickel corner, slot corner was like a huge priority for me in free agency or here in the draft. I'm not as worried about it. Like, if Taryn Johnson can play at that level he played at the second half of the season, I'm cool with keeping him on his rookie deal and riding it out for a couple more years, seeing what he's got. So definitely, I think I have to give it to my guy, Taryn Johnson.
Hey, same page, 100%. I think that he showed it, and I'm in the same boat in that I was a little nervous about that. I drive Eric nuts talking about the big nickel and stuff like that, but I do kind of want another piece that's different from him. I want that third safety better than Dean Marlowe box player, but I don't want to take away from Taryn Johnson snaps. I want it to be the cobbled together replacement for Matt Milano, and that we have that other weapon there. I think I
want it to be Saren Neal, but we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Biggest disappointment, I think that I was torn a little bit with like the Tremaine Edmonds and Ed Olivers of the world, only because I expected more from them. I think you can explain, Oliver playing out of position, not having the star kind of guy next to him, Edmonds playing injured and not having Milano for big stretches. I think you can tell yourself reasons why they didn't have great seasons, and my disappointment is relative to what I was expecting versus they were just bad, because they weren't. I don't think they were bad players. But I was torn with both of them in that I was disappointed compared to what I was expecting.
I think my biggest disappointment is the linebacking core, but not, again, I agree with you, not because of their play directly, but I think the circumstance that they had this year that they went through and tried to battle back through, I think, hurt both of their development. There was flashes of it. We saw when Milano and Edmonds were able to play together, that things got better. But I don't think they had it long enough with consistency enough to see the type of development we want to see, especially at this point for Tremaine Edmonds. I think it was almost a wash of a year, and seeing who he's truly going to be when things are all in the right situation going forward with him and a good linebacker and in full health the full season, who can he be? I think we were robbed of that this year for the way the trajectory went for them.
A couple final little ones. Special teams standout. Anybody you want to shout out on the special teams unit?
Sir Neal, my guy. I think he might not ever be a guy that contributes on defense, but I think that there's a good chance that he can be our poor man's like Matthew Slater. I think he can be
the second most special team snaps.
He's up there, man. I think the next couple of years he might be one of these guys that gets talked about around the league as one of the better special teams
He's
players.
A phenomenal gunner. He really is.
Yeah, he's always down there. He's always making a play. I think he's built for special teams, and he took a big jump. And then I'd say maybe my runner-up is Bam Johnson. I think he carved out himself a nice role on this team for special teams. Whether or not he is a pass-rushing contributor going forward, I think he can stick on this team with teams for a while.
I'll give an honorable mention to Tyler Medikevich as well. He played on every single unit and played really well. When you spend that kind of money to bring a guy in to kind of set the tone for everything, they better do it, and he did. He played on every single unit and played darn well. So he's the kind of guy that, kind of similar to John Brown, do I want to pay him $3.25 million? No. But do I want him to be gone? No, not really. Right. I'd love to find a way to give him like a 2-year extension that drops that number down to $1.5 million instead. But I'm looking forward to seeing if they can find a way to keep him.
Yeah, I think we're going to see as the league year gets closer, a lot of these conversations that Bean's having, I think will all pop up at the same time, and we'll start to get a bunch of little news. Manikevich restructures his deal. They'll save $1 million here. We're going to start to see Bean's been working the phones. Trust me. He's trying to figure out where to squeeze money where he can. If anybody's figuring it out, it's going to be Joe Shane, Brandon Bean, and Overdorf, this group. I have total confidence in that.
Any special shout-outs for the position coaches?
I don't think Bob Babich gets the credit that he deserves for what he is. I think there's a few position coaches in the NFL that are so elite at what they do, and Bob Babich in linebackers has got to be up there as one of the most elite at what he does and doesn't get enough credit for doing it. I think Bills fans sometimes aren't necessarily as grateful as we should be that we have two young, really good linebackers. If they keep Milano, I think that goes to what Babich can do for these types of guys and the type of investment that they put in his hands. I'm excited to see what he does with them, but I love him as position coach. I hope he stays here in Buffalo. I think he's right up there with what's the New England?
Dante Scarnecchia.
Yeah, of like just a guy that belongs coaching one position for the rest of his life, and he's going to be damn good at it.
Oh yeah, I'll give a shout out to Chad Hall. I thought that the way that the development for Gabe Davis, the integration with the other pieces, finding a way to keep everybody engaged and involved in what they were doing and the way they talk about him. I'm excited about having a guy like that around. I think that's an exciting piece, and he has a bright future.
Absolutely.
All right, man. This kind of wraps it up for the 2020 season. We'll start to now fully pivot into looking forward. Hopefully, we have to do a surprise pod to talk about the signing of J.J. Watt.
We'll Kawan Short.
Jump out. All the other released players that are going to come up. And believe me, there are going to be a lot of names. There are going to be a ton of names cut loose here. We'll talk about all of them. We'll start getting into there. The next couple weeks will be pretty focused on either free agent needs for the Bills and potential spots to fill them. We'll focus on that for a while, and then we'll switch fully into draft mode, and we'll go into that long stretch. We'll have some of our friends on, Christian Page and Russell Brown and Zach Hicks and all the guys doing all the work there. Make sure you're checking out the awesome breakdowns. They're actually having Jarrett Patterson on. I think Eric's doing a film breakdown with the University of Buffalo running back coming up next week, so make sure you're checking that out next Tuesday. All kinds of great content that we'll have for you guys. Anything for the people before we sign off here, Aaron?
Oh, man, come hit me up on the Twitter box at Aaron Quinn 716. I haven't been tweeting as much lately because I haven't had any good hot takes, man. I'm low on the hot takes. I think I used most of mine up for the year.
come and find me. I'm still trying to keep myself entertained on there, mostly trying to find things to stir up trouble where I can. But thank you guys very, very much. We're looking forward to this offseason. We're going to be there for you guys all the way through. Going to do a couple more, salary cap specials and things to kind of explain the different options we have. Look at all the things we can put together and how we can make this great Bills team even greater. So on behalf of Aaron Quinn, this is Greg Tompsett. You have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.